One. Hello and welcome to the 19th episode of the Creation of Anatomy podcast. I am your host, Eric Valero.
I'm your host, Mercedes Hollcraft, and these are my parents. Why don't you say your name and that's it.
And that were her parents. You go first, baby.
Okay. My name is Tom Hollcraft, and this is my wife.
Mercedes.
Yes, and you've been married how many years?
152.
Oh my
Oh,
goodness.
baby.
With love, honey, with love.
35 and a half. Oh, there was
35.
that couple that was celebrating 35 at
They
church
at
at
Mass
today.
this morning.
And that reminded me that we were at 35 also.
Yeah,
But
Wow.
It reminded me that we have more time in our marriage than they do.
Yeah.
Just barely.
Because it's a
6 months.
competition.
What's
Yeah.
the gift for the 35th? Because they're all the different.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's traditional, and then there's less traditional. So I don't know the traditional
I
one.
thought it was choral for 35.
Yeah, so
Something
Oh.
like that.
that I don't like. It would be something like that.
Mm.
I just know. I don't know. There's like a newer one that it would be like, I don't know, paperclip or something.
Paperclip.
No, paper was long ago.
No,
I don't think we've
Polyurethane.
been doing it though. We haven't really.
We
been
haven't-
doing
we
it
haven't.
anything like that. But
no.
I did last year.
For 34?
no, for 35.
No, for 35.
So
Oh,
he gave me
Because
the
it was emeralds.
Yeah, he gave me
Mm.
the
It was
emeralds.
emerald for
Fancy.
30. Oh, it's 35. It's
Emerald is 35. There you go.
I'll be
coral.
Tom right now. Good God.
All right.
It
So,
depends on their level.
I watched a few Christmas movies so
Mhm.
far on our trip. So, Mercedes, what makes a
We have an
Christmas
issue with
movie
this,
great?
We do. As long as it's made by Hallmark, it's Christmas.
Yeah, that's the problem around the house. Is that he loves Hallmark movies,
Mm.
and every year
a
it
guilty
feels
pleasure.
like he moves up closer. Like this year, you were watching him at Halloween. You started.
But it's technically Christmas if it's Hallmark.
Yes,
Right.
that's yeah.
Yeah.
I think we have very different lists. of
Yeah,
what
because
we
she
like.
thinks Die Hard's a Christmas movie.
It is.
Yeah.
It
Oh.
definitely is.
I
I
think
think-
that's a trope of Christmas in general that Die Hard has to be mentioned. So
Yeah, I guess
I
so.
just think if
Because
you
it
have a
is.
celebration in it and you hear Christmas carols, but the story's got to be like, somewhat surprising and engaging, and I don't think. most
Well, we
of these
watched one.
Hallmark
No,
movies-
they're not. They're very predictable. But there was one that we watched this year that she really liked. The
Well, yeah.
champagne.
I told you guys about
Yeah,
that. The
Champagne
champagne problems.
Problems.
I like that
Mm.
one. That was a surprise of
the
a
Taylor Swift song.
No.
no.
I didn't know you
But-
knew Taylor Swift.
So yeah,
But it is.
it is apparently.
But she got that from somewhere else, right?
She did.
Anyway, that's not the point. It was a good movie.
Hmm.
Okay.
I like the movie.
We did not watch that.
No,
I'm a
We
big
watched The
Hallmark
Godfather,
person too.
The Godfather.
Godfather's Christmas movie.
That was a surprising. Wait, there was some
There
Christmas
was
stuff
there
in
was
there.
a
Yeah,
scene.
well- I don't know, spoiler alert, but
Oh,
Well, it spans like 6 years. You're gonna get some Christmas in there, So.
Yeah.
it was just
That's
like
true.
at the beginning when someone got shot and someone was at the movie theaters and it was all Christmas decorated.
oh, okay.
Oh, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wouldn't say that it was a Christmas movie, but
Well, cannolis are a Christmas treat.
are they?
Very heavily cannoli themed in that.
It was. It was.
Yeah.
They're an everyday treat.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
know, I think the supermarkets have killed them with those cannoli chips. I know. They're good. I'm not saying they're not good, but they've killed cannolis because no one gets the cannoli shells anymore and fills them with the cream. They just want to have the chips now.
That's because no one makes good cannoli shells.
Okay, so I have to say, and I don't want to offend anyone, but I've never had a good cannoli.
I don't even know what a cannoli.
You know
is.
that I not offended
I
at all.
do.
I appreciate that
Yeah.
because you have high standards for cannolis, as you
Yeah.
should.
Yeah,
You're like an honorary Italian.
Well, also,
Mm.
you both live in California, which is where we're at right now, in case viewers don't know.
So
We're in
everybody
Are
wants
we
to
supposed
be.
to be looking at the camera?
No.
They know they're there.
Oh, no, no, no. Okay, okay.
Yeah, this is our first week in California. We still have one more week in California, which is where most of your children live.
Yeah, it's so nice to have everybody here. That was really nice.
That was-
I said that to you guys yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing that makes me more happy than having all of my children and their loved ones under my roof.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it doesn't last for long. Everybody goes back to where they are, but California is home.
Mm.
And
Kind of leads to our first question too.
Yeah, so now you have 7 children, and almost 3 of them have kids. One of them's
Mhm.
pregnant.
mm-hmm,
So you have 5 grandchildren, 1 on the way.
mm-hmm.
So our first question is about you two being grandparents and how going from just parents to grandparents has changed your married life and your relationship.
Excuse me.
I mean, I think that there's the ongoing changing in the years that we've been married. There's always something that comes up that somehow shifts the way that we have been, uh, spending time or talking, or the things that we're having to work through. Um, and then there was that not lapse, but that time where our kids were becoming adults, but before the baby started coming, that allowed us time to really just be with each other and spend time with each other and get to know each other. And I think that was a bigger kind of a bigger time of transition for us.
Adjustment.
Yeah, it was adjusting to like just being us and not having like what I called when we would talk is like the kid buffer. Of like the kids are there, so if we're having difficulty, it'd be easy to say, well, I'll just be with the kids, or worry about the kids and we'll handle it later or whatever. um, and that was really important, I think, because then when the grandkids came, during that time we learned to be more aware of each other, more aware of how we were feeling, more intuitively knowing like that, Tom needs time, or I'm feeling tired, or I'm anxious about what's coming up. So then when the grandkids came, I feel like there's this appreciation of being with everybody, just more genuinely being present. And the kid and the babies, of course, they bring us so much joy, like that pure joy of once again falling in love with children, but in a different way. And somehow that has created an appreciation of each other. Like I feel like when we are with the kids, there's another facet of Tom that I'm learning. Like there was Tom, my husband, and then there was Tom, the father of my children, and now Tom is Bonpapa. And there's a surge of like growth and love in that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was a big change, but the change was I don't want to say the change happened because we started having grandchildren. Mercedes is right. They're the bigger change. It wasn't even a change because really throughout our whole marriage, there's always a constant openness and sharing. But when you guys were in high school, good Lord, everything was so busy that we didn't have time for each other, let alone trying to make sure we had time. Even when you were younger, we'd have our little dad daughter, mom son, mom daughter dates. Like we would do little dates because if you've got 7 children, sometimes you need to spend time with just an individual, right? So we did things like that. And then Mercedes is right, like once you're out, then the kids were on their own. There was the bigger change there, getting to not get to know each other again. It was just, where are we at now?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Because I know Mercedes, but where's her desires right now? Because those things do change.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the grandchildren came, the change was just not realizing and coming to the realization, I guess, that we can love so much more.
Mm-hmm.
That there's so much more to be able to give. And sadly, when your parents, you're not sure, like you just want to make sure you're providing, and there's a lot of worry and a lot of just rules and whatever, right? And you try to be present, but there's so much going on that I know for myself, and I guess I can only speak for myself, I wasn't as present as I could have been.
Mm-hmm.
And with the grandchildren, and you're watching them, you're just watching them.
Right, like that's what you're supposed to be doing at that time.
That's what it is,
Yeah.
right? And so, and there's a certain beauty in that, and there's a certain just desire to be able to love on these little ones because you do. Like, I mean, it's not even a desire is not the right word. You just do, you know. And seeing that in Mercedes, so going back to the marriage part, seeing that in Mercedes has been wonderful. It's reminded me of Mercedes as a mother, but I witness that all the time, you know. But then seeing her as a grandmother, just
As abuela.
Abuela, I knew she was going to correct me. But yeah, it's
like a whole different side of her you've never experienced.
Kind of. I mean, there's a little bit of you know, her as mom there, you know, but really it's more just this unconditional, like, just hug and cuddle and, you know, that kind of thing, which is really neat to see.
Yeah.
Well, and then being grandparents, like being, it also is this like almost like a redemptive quality to it. Like I feel like when I'm around my kids, I can do, I can be more unconditional with my love with them in a way that sometimes, you know, regrettably you can look back and go, oh, if I had just been more patient, if I had just listened better, if I had just, you know, been able to like give them the kind of like that affection and the time and sat and read to them and played with them more and painted and did all those things that sometimes I would be caught up with, like I have to start dinner, which we do, and that's obviously you have to do those things, but there's a little bit of redemption in that, and then to add to that, there's also more opportunity for reflection. Like I feel like when, you know, we were having kids, it was you know, we loved our time together, and I feel like we tried really hard to, like Dad was saying, have those one-on-one dates and be aware of what was going on in your lives. But then, like at the end of the day, we were exhausted and tired, and it was we, you know, passed out and woke up the next day and did it again. And now I find that we're sitting and we're talking about it. Like we're talking about, like, did you see how Joshua was with the girls, or can you, you know, like how Cecilia is loving on Liam, or how, you know, like we have that reflection, that just really looking at it and seeing the beauty in it, in addition to really taking part in a whole different way, that I feel like, okay, I can now do some of the things that maybe I didn't do as well as I had hoped when I was, you know.
Well, the other thing that I've realized is I look and see how our daughter-in-laws or son-in-laws, which is really just son and daughter, but you know, the way Colin will be with Sienna, you know, and how he'll cuddle her or whatever, and it's and to see how that supports and lifts up Cecilia. Or the same can be said of Hannah and the way she lifts and supports Joshua and the way she is as mom. You know, it's just I'm seeing more of the picture, whereas before we have a bit of myopic vision, you know, because we got to get our thing done, whatever that might be, right? But it's in regards to parenting. As grandparents, our thing is just to be.
That's nice.
That's such a particular, well, it's such a particular relationship that I know a lot of people have with their grandparents, that they feel like, especially when I ask my students, like, who is somebody who has inspired you? And some of them will say their parents, but a lot of them will say their grandparents. Like my grandmother, she prays so much. My grandmother, she like loves me unconditionally and things like that. And it probably is because there's a particular perspective you have now outside of being parents. But as grandparents, you get even more of a glimpse of the way that God loves in a new way that's like different from the way that a mom and dad might just love their children. That's interesting.
Ready for the second question? All right. So what about you? Well, I'm going to ask each of you guys independently. So Tom, we'll start with you.
Okay.
What about you makes you the right person to lead Mercedes to heaven?
What about me? Well,
It's an interesting question.
it is, because I want to turn it around and say all of my variety of flaws strengthens her patience and and helps lead her to heaven. But what other things? Well, I guess two things from a because those are true. You know, those more
Absolutely.
negative things are true. You know, I can be, you know, compulsive, and Mercedes is like, no, 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 no. You know, I mean, those types of things. And in all honesty, I think that leads me. That's where she guides me. But I imagine that helps. You know, her. But for thinking of the positive qualities, I guess. I am servant oriented. I tend to be, or at least try to be, servant oriented. So doing things, and something I've told Mercedes in the past is doing things to wow Mercedes or wow people, like not because I want them to give any credit towards me, but just because they deserve it, right?
Right.
Those types of things. And so providing that service that tries to go that extra step. And Mercedes has mentioned a few times, maybe more than a few times, how she just loves that quality in me,
right.
and that it reminds her to just be more generous of time and of whatever it is, time, talent, treasure, right? Like to be more generous in those capacities. And I appreciate that she recognizes it, but at the same time, it is something that I've always done, I think.
It's also an element of receiving on Mercedes' part then, because I think sometimes, especially for men, being of service does seem like they want credit. But I think that sometimes men have certain gifts from God that they have inside them, and they want to show the person that they love. And it's something that it's not for the point of getting credit, but it's just to share that gift that God gave them, right? Like that full gift of themselves. And sometimes it's through something that can be maybe a little bit like show offy, you know, but it's not necessarily like if I cook a nice meal or something like that. I don't need you to say like, oh, really good at cooking or something like that, versus like wow, God gave you this gift of, and you've cultivated this gift that God gave you, and we can both appreciate it.
Yeah, like the parable of the talents.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And I think sometimes in marriage, it's hard to see, like, it's hard for me to see what do I bring into it, like in a good way. Like, I mean, I know on a day to day, oh, you know, I do the cooking, or I will schedule our times, what we're going to do with our time, or whatever it is. But like, how am I helping us as, you know, in holiness and in faith? And I think it's much easier for me, like with that question, to think about like, well, what makes him the right person? And Tom's right; he's the one that like reminds me to be generous, to not be so caught up in the material, to, you know, be forgiving. That's one thing that I've always, you know, like admired, like that, how forgiving he is, and I think has played a big part in our marriage. And I was thinking about that question, like what makes me the right person, and I don't know that I can say like one particular thing, like this is what I do, because you know, I feel sometimes with my faith that because I'm a rule follower, I'm going to do the things that I know I need to do. This is what we need to do, and you know. But I would say this, like in thinking of the question, well, I think more than anybody in the world, I want him to go to heaven. I want him there. You know, like I can't. I mean, obviously, God is all love, and you know, if you know we ended up there without one or the other, like that, it wouldn't be like, you know, we would be devastated. But I think even if, you know, I don't know, more than anything, I want him to get there. I want him to be in heaven, and so I think about that a lot in our marriage, and how we are in our ups and downs. You know, we recently had a conversation about how we got lazy one week and didn't go to mass or something, and then afterwards we're like, we got to go to confession, and we went to confession the next day, like on Monday, and then and the priest was like, uniquely, I think more than any other confession, when we both had this experience of like, we went in to confess that, and he was just like, I know for me, like what I heard in his voice, he said like, why would you do that? And it felt like this heaviness, and what I remember thinking is like, I would never want to risk his soul or my soul, because we have worked in our lives to continue to be faith-filled and to seek the Lord, and even in our downs, and so we had that conversation about like the most dangerous thing. Do you remember that we talked about, like, more than like being completely anti-God or super zealous that you don't see and love others, being in that lukewarm place where it's just like, it's probably the most dangerous place to be. And so when we find ourselves, or at least for me, when I find myself there, there's this fear of like him, us not getting to heaven. And I think really what makes me the best person, that's really what comes to mind, is that I want it for him more than anybody else, not that more than other people. I want it for other people, but you know what I mean? Like,
it's a particular calling you have.
Like that's kind of before me, and years ago, I used to be out of fear. I mean, I got to be honest, I had like this fear of like, oh my gosh, we're going to hell. But now it really is just like that experience of those glimpses that we get of God's love, and I think like heaven's going to be so much more than that, and so I want that for him. I want that for me. I want that for you guys, and so, but I don't know that necessarily I'm doing something, I don't know, in my temperament or characteristic, I'm doing something that makes me the best person.
Well, her example is extraordinary. Her example, her attentiveness during Mass, and how to maintain, she'll even take little notes or write things down or something. And then it'll be, sometimes there's a discussion or just a desire to be in prayer, be in communication with God. And it encourages me. Her challenge, sometimes she'll challenge me, when's the last time we've done this? Or we did, maybe it's not we, it's just myself, those are good. Those are things that I need to hear to kind of keep myself. And then, to be honest, one of the things that's drawn me and kept me close to God is Mercedes and I desire to be present with our children, and our children are all so close to God. And we've talked about this as well, how that has drawn us into deeper relationship with God and with one another, to be honest. But yeah.
Well, it's kind of amazing after 35 years. There are certain things that just come naturally to you, and I guess this kind of leads to the next question, but there's certain things that come naturally to you because you've been practicing it since you were like 17, 19 years old. So it's like, this is just like a part of who you are, is like taking care of each other. But at the same time, I think some people, they get into habits in marriage that like, this is your role, this is my role, and like we can't step outside of that. And sometimes that creates like tension and friction. But because it's just the way that things are, you just stay in it. And I think even for me, it's inspiring to see you as adults, like knowing who you were at one point and seeing that you've grown from that point too. Because I think sometimes I see married couples or just adults in general who like I meet them, or I met them at one point, and 5 years later I meet them again and they're the exact same person that they were 5 years before. And it's like have you not changed at all? Like you haven't grown at all. But it's cool, like, and inspiring to see that you guys continue to grow like closer to each other and closer to God. And I guess you could say
I was gonna say that goes right into the third question there. So what about the society we live in today makes it most difficult to start a family successfully?
I think, we were 17 and 19 when we met, and I don't think we thought about it back then as far as like what we were doing or how contrary to society standards that was. We were just like, oh, I love you, you love me, let's get married, and so we were 19, 21 getting married, and we weren't thinking about things like, do we have a house, do we have a college degree, do we have money, do we have this, we have that. We just like, we're kind of being driven in that direction, and that's where we went, and we knew like things are going to be taken care of. And I think now what I see is like that society is so driven by like the idea of what I want and the what's good for me, what's going to make me happy, how am I going to fulfill my dreams and desires? What's going to, blah, 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 all this stuff. And that's contrary to what marriage is where you have to enter into it and die to self. Like, you hear that. And we've been to a lot of weddings and you hear it over and over again. And the longer we're married, you realize like what that really means. There's a constant. There's big ways where we have to die to self, and there's little ways all the time, every day, where we have to die to self. And society, that seems like ludicrous. It seems foolish. Why would you give in to what you want for somebody else? Like, what's that person? What's in it for me in that? And so I think at that level, at that spiritual level, and then materialistic too, like just in the sense of like, just for for a couple to get started, to have just the basics is so difficult. And then you have to continue to fight those urges. And I know that's been a part of, I know for me, I've struggled much more than Tom over the years of like, why can't we have this? Why can't we have a bigger house? Why can't we, be able to do this, do that? And it seems like in a way it's for the right reasons. Like we want to make our lives easier for our children. So what is there? Why is it bad that we have extra money to make that happen? But really, that's not what our children need. That's not what we need. And so I think really it's such a contradiction of what we're being called to, not even just in marriage, but just in a life of faith, in the journey to the Lord and the journey towards salvation, versus what the world is saying, like find what you want, find what you need, what makes you happy, and it's like that mentality, I think, is making it harder. And I think that I we see like these days, like so many young people who are in relationships for so long and still choose not to get married. And I don't want to say this in a judgmental way, because everybody has their own journey, and the conversion happens when the Lord works on our hearts and not when somebody else tells us what to do. But it is still, again, it's that like not wanting to give completely of yourself. And the bottom line is marriage is not going to work to the best of what it's meant to do if we are not willing to give completely of ourselves.
Yeah, I always wonder what people in a relationship, like let's say they're of marrying age, in their 20s or something like that, and they've been dating for 5, 6, 7 years, right? I wonder what is it that stopped them from making that jump to getting married, right? Like, why are you dating if it's not to get married? So you have to wonder, are they like trying somebody out for a while, or they know the person's not right, and they're just kind of stringing the person along, like what is it? Because like you said, you don't be judgmental, but also there's certain questions that arise of the modern day dating world, of like, people don't date to get married anymore. Guys don't pay for the first date's meal or any date's meal anymore, because they're like, well, I want to be able to bail out when I can and not have lost any money. Like that's it shows that like when you pay for that first meal, it kind of shows like I'm investing in you, because I'm not dating to date and dating to marry. And when that's missing, it's like, I don't know, you wonder why it gets dragged on. It's like, well, what are these forces pulling that you're not able to give yourself completely?
On the flip side, I feel like there's like people who almost have in their mind like the only reason to get married is if you want to have kids. Like,
sure, that
would be the only reason to, I don't know, like have some sort of structure for the family that you want to raise. And because so many people don't want to have kids anymore, then to them it's like, why even get married? So it's like, it's kind of terrible, because it's not just them not wanting to make a commitment, but it's also them not wanting to like even, I don't know, like be fruitful in their relationship.
It begs the same question. It's like, you have to wonder, if you're dating and the plan isn't to get married, what's the point? And if you're married and you don't want to have children, I mean, you go the same way. It's like, well, people think you have to have children when you get married. It's like, well, you're kind of correct. Like, what is the point of getting married if, like, I mean, I understand there's infertility problems, right? But like, if you don't plan on having children,
well, there's
open to it,
open to it,
and I think that there's layers. Like, Tom and I have been doing engaged encounter retreats for years, and one of the things that we share about at retreats is about natural family planning, and of course you talk about like the statistics of couples who practice that and how much more successful marriages are when you do. But really, when it comes down to it, is like that sacrificial. Correct. Again, going back to the vulnerability and the sacrificial giving of oneself, and that when you are practicing, when you're in marriage, and that and couples think, well, then that means that intimacy is a free for all, and we can be intimate anytime. But when you practice natural family planning in whatever form, I know there's all kinds of different ways. I'm not up to date on all of that anymore, but the idea being that there's a time, when you are you cannot be intimate in that way, then there's a sacrifice there that helps you to grow as a couple, because it helps you to practice how to think of the other, how to put away your own desires, how to say, this is something that my flesh is wanting, and I'm going, and we're not going to, because this isn't the right time to have a child, or maybe however you're choosing to do natural family planning, but it always comes down to the same thing. It's that the willingness to be completely vulnerable and give of yourself, and that selfish, or that versus that selfishness of like, well, how is that going to inconvenience me? And so when we talk to couples about that, like, it feels like an inconvenience. It feels like, oh, well, then we're going to have to abstain for how much of the month? But really, you learn how to like be with each other in ways that you maybe wouldn't otherwise. You learn how to like hear each other out, to talk through things that maybe would be more difficult. And that translates into other parts of your marriage as well. When you learn to be really intimate with each other in not a physical way, then it's going to be easier to have the difficult conversations about other things, about career, about money, about child rearing, about all those other things. And I think it comes, whether it's couples who don't want to give to each other in marriage, or not wanting to have kids, it always comes down to like, well, how is that going to affect me? What am I going to have to give up? Because whether it's in marriage, when you really truly give yourself to the other person, or when you are being a mother, like that requires all of you for you to be able to do it, to where it's going to be fruitful and beautiful in the way that God calls it to be. Because I watch my kids now with the babies, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember that. Like, there is no stopping. You are constantly breathing, living, feeding those children, and there's no rest from that for the most part. But there's so much beauty that comes from that as well. So much joy that comes from that. And it's the same thing in marriage. Like, I can't just say, well, I need a 3-day break from Tom. We're not going to talk. We're not going to, or there's this issue that's come up. Nope, we're just going to put it aside and not discuss. Yeah. We have to be willing to do the difficult. And there's a lie out there that means like losing some kind of freedom that really is a farce. It's not real. That's not real freedom.
Right. I think that it comes down to the idea that you could separate consequences from actions, right? Where people kind of falsely believe that actions would be better off without consequences. And it's like, well, then it's meaningless, right? If you have an intimacy with your partner in a marriage, there's consequences to that. You can't just forego the possibility of those consequences in lesser and greater extreme measures. But when you do, that makes it meaningless, right? And I think people have that maybe short-sightedness of, this is what's going to make me happy now.
Yeah.
And children are in my way of that. And I feel like it's not even that I think this is like one opinion versus another. I think if you think it out, most people would probably say, on the grand scheme of things, having children would be more worth it than whatever you could possibly fill in the blank here of what I'm going to have to give up. I don't think that you'd ever see somebody go like, well, that's a pretty big one. I think let's forego having kids because this is so important.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think there will be a few people that have that thought process. I think there are people that could make a good argument that there's, if I don't get married, there is more freedom. You were saying, it's kind of a lie. I'm not sure it's a lie. It's just, it doesn't fulfill truth. You do not experience love by yourself.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So I don't think that there's a lie there. It's just this misunderstanding of what freedom is, because the idea of freedom in the world is that you get to do whatever you want. But the idea of freedom in the eyes of God for any Christian is that we get to do whatever God wants.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? God has given us the world, right? Like there's so much we're able to do, and to do so within the confines of God's will as best we can, then we experience a true freedom that those who do whatever they want don't experience, because there's no love there. And now I know I'm generalizing or whatever, and some may argue, there's love. Until you provide the sacrifice and the difficulty, because following God is not easy. You know, it's a struggle, and part of that struggle is with our desires. And the world says, do whatever you want. So, why are they dating? They're dating so that they can be with this man or this woman, and enter into sexual intimacy. That's the desire.
Right,
to be honest, I don't even think intimacy matters to many of them.
You know what I see? I don't know. There's something like I had these like visualizations in my head, but it feels like it's so. It might sound silly, but in Finding Nemo, when they're on the was it the East Australian Current?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. I kind of imagine that being like God's will. Of like it's just like it's powerful, and when you jump on board, it just like shoots you along, and you have some like energy behind it. And I could imagine somebody like taking their own will and their like little like spur of the moment like desires that they want is kind of like a little plankton trying to like swim in a different direction, and they're going so slow. And if they would just veer into the current, right? But they're just swimming with their little whatever you call them.
That's a good analogy, because isn't it like kind of scary for them to like get like jump
It's
into the
very
current, right?
I when I remember seeing, I thought it was just such a powerful scene when I first saw that movie, because I'm like, there's a truth in this. There is a truth in like the faith it takes to jump into a current, that it's gonna take you in this direction, and you have to believe it's gonna take you to a better place. Like that is like, I can't think of a better analogy for God's will, or having faith in God's will than the East Australian Current.
Good one.
Better than the Basil one.
I like it. I mean, if you think about like even just how far you're gonna go, because you couldn't possibly go that fast by yourself,
Right?
Or get that far by yourself.
But no.
I'm gonna have to watch the movie again with that in mind.
Yeah.
I have to watch
It's
it.
It's
I think I want to show it to my 7th graders actually.
Yeah.
I like it. Good.
Perfect. You're allowed to show movies to your kids?
So,
Oh, that is like strictly forbidden at high school.
Yeah, movies are evil.
They're like, you better be teaching the whole time. All right, ready for 4?
Your last question.
What is the most important part of you that you had to let go of to become a better person in your marriage?
I don't know that. Well, I mean, I can think of if something popped in right away, but it is a constant letting go. It's I think back to young Mercedes, and for some reason, for many years, I thought that I was a more meek person. You probably knew I was at the time. But I could think like I was kind of quiet, and I didn't, wasn't opinionated. But as I got older and looking at that, like I have, this is in my relationship with my husband, with my children, with the Lord, there's a need for control. It's probably why I chose the career path that I have. And I think that that's something that I'm constantly having to let go of. And and for a long time, like I wasn't even aware that it was there. It was like, the Lord was so merciful. It's like, we're just going to keep moving. And then when it's the right time, I'm going to show you, here's where the struggle is. And then, and then finally realizing like, this is why I'm having such a hard time, because where does my fear and my anxiety come from? It's because I want control, and control is not really possible. And especially when it comes to like, I want control in my marriage. Well, there's a whole other human being here who has a free will and choices, and so he's not going to do everything that I want him to do. And I want control over what my children do, and I can't do that because they choose to move to New Jersey, and I can't stop them.
Hey, New Jersey's great.
Well, you met Eric, so there you go. That was, it's a good New Jersey.
But I could really appreciate your efforts towards letting go of control, because it's very obvious that I see that's something that you want and it tempts you to take control. And I feel like, especially in our relationship, I have seen, because I want you to know that I see this, that when you back off a little bit, and I'm like, oh wow, like that's amazing to see, because I know you want to protect your daughter, and you want to make sure that like her relationship is the way you think it ought to be. And I'm an odd person, so I definitely go
it's not just you. It's not just you.
In an odd way.
No, I mean, I do think like that's something, like if you were to, I have like years and years worth of journals, and sometimes I'll go back and read, and I think like, man, at that time I didn't name it for what it was, but I can say this is what it was. This is why I was struggling. This is why I was questioning the Lord. This is why I was, having a difficult time in this or that situation. And I find that there's definitely still that time, and like I said, in my work, and like, Tom is fairly easygoing, and if he would let me, I would organize his whole life and tell him where to go and what to do and how to do it.
I'd let her.
You would not, but I think like that's not what I'm called to do. Like that's not, like, and at the same time, like, I think it also has become a realization of like, the Lord created me this way, and so there's a good way to use whatever that is that leads to that. There's something at the core of that I have to identify and go, this is what the Lord wants me to do with that, but not necessarily like tell everybody what to do and when to do it, and and think like I know better, or I know it should go this way, and so yeah, like you said, I feel myself doing that too, where it's like something happens and I want to step in, and then I go, there's that voice that goes, okay, just step back for a minute. So I think as far as like letting go, like there's, our lives are a journey, and I have had to, it's a daily thing. It's like surrender that control to who it really belongs to, and that's the Lord. And then much better things happen when I do that.
That's an important reflection, though, that it's not just like when you start dating or you marry someone or you have kids, like it's not like there are certain things you have to let go, but there are also certain things that, like, it's not that they are bad, it's just they come from something good, but we often use them in bad ways. So like finding at the core, like, what is it that drives me to do this thing? Because God gave it to me, so maybe he's wanting me to use it towards something else so that I can be somebody else.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that realizing that some of those things, sometimes we want to say this is a bad thing and I'm going to get rid of it. But I remember, like, especially like in a few years ago, starting to really like go. I went on that pilgrimage with with the TOB Institute, and Christopher West talks a lot about like that, the how things get twisted. Like there's a way that God has created things, and then they get twisted, and so that having that realization of like, it's not something that's bad that needs to be gone. It's something that needs to be purified.
Right.
It's something that needs to be purified and brought back to what the Lord intended with that. And so this is Mercedes, who was created, and it came, and there was an essence that was there. And then because of the circumstances of my life, I had to learn to have more control. I had to learn to safeguard, to do those kinds of things that led to then it being something that God doesn't want. And so then realizing like, oh, this isn't like, oh Lord, like help me like be rid of it, but help me purify it and find the source of it. Help me find what it is that you originally created in me, so that I can do the work that I can be more present in my marriage, that I can be more giving in my marriage, and in being a mother and a mother-in-law and a friend and a sister and a abuela and all that, because I'm not going to change. I am who I was created to be. I'm not going to change my temperament completely.
Yeah.
Good answer.
What about you, though?
Do I need to change something?
What did you change?
Perfect. You are perfect.
What did I change? It's interesting. It's not a change that happens like, oh, I need to change this. It's a continual, and Mercedes kind of call it. It's a constant thing. Now my changes now are much more minor than maybe they were before. There was a lot of selfishness. There was a lot of well, I gotta get what I need to get done, and then Mercedes, I'll help Mercedes get her stuff done. But I need to, I thought of myself first a lot. And, I come from a family of 10 brothers and sisters, 11 kids. And you kind of do have to think,
survival.
For kind of survival. And having a lot of brothers and sisters was fantastic. It was great. And some of my, you grow up with your closest friends, right? But there is a certain, if I'm wanting something, I'm going to have to seek it out myself. And I still had that when I got married. And some would say, well, yeah, because you married when you were 21. But I've known people who got married at 30 and had the same immature mentality, maybe even more deeply rooted. But I did have to change that. And it's not something that I just changed and everything was good. Like, it is still an ongoing process. You go to confession, you say your sins, and then we go to confession again, and we find we're saying a lot of the same sins. And then we find that we get rid of one of them. And when we got rid of that one or two, we find that, wow, those one or two were hiding this 7 other sins I didn't even realize, and it's not as big, but something else you got to work on. And it's a constant process. So we're constantly, and so for myself, I'm constantly working on it, and hills and valleys, right? Like, sometimes it's going really well, and sometimes I got down on myself because of whatever reason, and it's a struggle. The one thing I would say, though, is I guess the biggest change was putting myself before God. Prior to Mercedes, it was trying to not be God to other people, but show other people what it's like to have Christ in your life. And now it's, well, if they see it, great, but I need to be present to God, know. And that's been a long process. I think it was a big change initially. So if there was one thing I changed fairly early on, was this idea that I need to work on a deeper, more real spiritual relationship with God. And that continued, but that was a change. Because before then, I went to church, I went to confession, I did the things you're supposed to do, but my prayer life was minimal. If people were seeing me, then they'd see me pray, but that's not having a prayer life.
Right.
But in my mind, that was having a prayer life. Now, one could argue again, and maybe I would even want to argue, but I was 19, 20 years old.
Right.
But a person, I've seen young people at 19, 20, 17, whatever, take on the real relationship, really enter in. And I think that was probably the biggest change. And then after that, you continually are changing, continually trying to be open-minded, continually trying to, something that I did probably, a few years after we got married is recognize when I'm wrong and just call it for what it is and say it, and put it out there. And that was a big change.
I think that allows for transformation. I think people are non-transformative, and I don't think they realize that they're starving themselves for the person they could be when they don't admit that they're wrong. Mm-hmm. Right? I think that's one of the, like, I see people, and that's a typical guy thing, I guess, where, like, someone, like, says something and they're proven wrong and they try to weasel their way out of it. I didn't say this, mm-hmm. I meant this, whatever it is. And I think you have an opportunity to grow, even though it's uncomfortable in those times. But, like, you starve yourself. I feel bad. I know some people that, like, starve themselves because they are never wrong. Mm-hmm. And
well, I had that mindset for years. Mm-hmm. And even now I struggle. Like, there's still some struggles, but I'm much more quicker to say, I need to double check. Yeah. I need to, whatever. Because something in me in my growing up or whatever just kind of instilled this mindset. Mm-hmm. But it was a change that was a intentional change early on. That is very, going back to the third question, very contradictory to the society standard, mm-hmm. But realizing, and we've just known this, to grow together, we need to allow each other the space for growth and the ability to, if she's growing in a different way, how is that happening?
Right.
Well, even time-wise, like I remember reading, and I may be getting wrong, so I am. Somebody out there can look it up. But at the beginning of Mere Christianity, I don't know if you guys have read C.S. Lewis, mm-hmm. Mere Christianity, but this was a big thing for me a long time ago. That because part of, like, the fervor of, like, knowing the Lord, you want to like, come on, just do the right thing, and mm-hmm. Join us here or whatever. But at the beginning of the book, he talks about, like, this house and being in the hallways, and I think the reference is to, like, people with different faiths and all of that, and, like, being in the hallway, and then at one point in your faith journey, you're going to walk into a room. That's the room that you've chosen to be in, and and I think about that sometimes. Like, I walked into, I was put in that room, I guess, as a Roman Catholic, but then I chose that in some mm-hmm. point in my life. But one of the things that he says, and I'm not going to quote it because I can remember, but basically the idea is one of the rules of the house is that you do not look down on others because they're in another room mm-hmm. or because they're still in the hallway, mm-hmm. And I love that, because particularly in marriage, that's been really important, because we can't force each other into something. We can't, like, say, well, but I want you to, like, say novenas with me every month, and I want you to, like, we can't do that. It has to be as much as we're doing this together and we're walking this road together, ultimately we are still, like, in a relationship with the Lord that is mm-hmm. personal and intimate, and it's just with him, and he knows my heart in a way that, as much as Tom loves me and as much as I've tried to let him in, Tom's never going to know, and vice versa. And so I think about that sometimes, and I think, like, in our marriage, there have been times probably where I've been, walking in the hallway and he's in the room, and vice versa. Maybe sometimes we've been in the room together and been, equals in, like, in worshiping the Lord and knowing what we want. But I still remember him saying that, like, one of the rules of the house is that you cannot judge others or look down on others because they are in a different room or because they're in the whole. And I just think, like, I think it's the hardest to do it with your spouse, because mm-hmm. you want so bad to be on the same page. You mm-hmm. want so bad to be in agreement. You want, like, I want him to be the one to say, we're going to go to confession every week, and we're going to get, and I think early on in my marriage, I would forgo some of those things and go, well, I'm going to wait till he says it. I'm going to wait till he tells us, mm-hmm. till he reminds us to pray, because he's supposed to be the spiritual head of the house, And then the Lord was like, hey, like, that's not exactly what it looks like. Like, and so being willing to say, okay, would you be willing to? Mm-hmm. And then seeing the fruit of that. I remember 3-4 years ago, I think we opened up a book, like a consecration to St. Joseph. We did that. And it was, like, so transformative for the two of us. But it was like it was one of those times where I was thinking of we should do something. I feel like we're struggling a little bit, and then you came up with it, like, right? You came and said, and I was praying and wanting to take that control. Like, I have these ideas, and then he was like, I think we should do a consecration at St. Joseph. I was like, yes, you know, and we did, and it was really beautiful. It was beautiful for our marriage. It was beautiful for me. And you know, it's like today, even with like the reflection on the Holy Family and thinking about St. Joseph and the role in his life, like that came from that experience that we had a few years ago of doing this together. So it just is like that respect of, you know, how we are growing as individuals, and then how that feeds into growing as a married couple. It's been really important.
That. That's great.
Yeah.
I just noticed your mic's dying, so we might as well.
Did I kill the mic?
You killed it. The words were so powerful.
So powerful.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us on our 19th episode of The Creation of Anatomy.
This was long coming, you guys being on our podcast.
Thank you.
And having our first married couple.
Yes, the first married couple we've been looking forward to for a while.
Yes, yeah. We're glad it was you two.
Thank you. Glad to do it.
Well, thanks for joining us. And we will see you guys next time on The Creation of Anatomy.
Cheers.
Cheers.